All right, everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. Today, I'm going to be talking about how you can take stuff that you've learned in the past from different situations, from different lakes, from different rivers, whatever, and apply those fishing techniques to places you've never been for. Someone like me, travel a lot, I'm on the road a lot, I'm always fishing places that I have no idea what's going on, and I use stuff that I've learned and read and talked to people about to try and catch fish. So let's dive right into it.
This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview conservationists, hunters, anglers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the greatest stories, information, and advice from the best in the world.
So anybody who's listened to this podcast knows constantly out in new places. I was just in DC. I just fished out on Lake Erie. I've been all over Michigan, Louisiana, Texas, all these places, Oklahoma, and I've never fished in these places before. Rarely do I have a guide or hire a guide to take me out. So I'm just kind of figuring out as I go. And I think one of the things that's helped me with that the most is reading lots of books about fishing. And I know there's like so many divisions about it doesn't matter if you don't go out there and hit the water, and you definitely have to hit the water to catch fish. That's a requirement. But having that base level knowledge and information about how fish act really, I feel like helps me be more successful. I don't think there's any time yet that I've been on the road where I haven't at least caught something. And that could be pure luck. I like to think it's through a lot of hard work and effort, but I read a lot of books about, your most common fish, bass, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, crappie, bluegill, and just having a base understanding of what they like helps you being able to go to these places and catch them fairly regularly. And one of the things that I really like from the book I'm reading now said, you can go to a place where there should be fish and there's no fish. But if you go to a place where there probably isn't fish, you're never going to catch any fish. So thinking about that is like structure, depth, things that you really don't know when you get to a place. You just kind of got to have an eye for and start to understand by looking at the water maybe, or looking around the edge of a small lake or pond or whatever, how these fish are likely going to be reacting in those places while you're there. Hey, I love hunting, I love fishing, and I love America. And with the 4th of July right around the corner, Uncle Louie's Fireworks wants you to celebrate this holiday responsibly. Uncle Louie's Fireworks is one of the only stores in the area that sells subtle fireworks, which emit less noise but still put on a great show, so you can enjoy a fireworks display without alarming wildlife, sensitive pets, and people who are averse to loud noises. They also offer fireworks ignition systems that allow you to set off fireworks with your phone to assure you still have all those very valuable fingers come your favorite hunting and fishing seasons. Uncle Louie's Fireworks, located at 7300 Schnipke Drive, Ottawa Lake, Michigan, just off US 23 Exit 1, wishes you a safe and happy 4th of July. And it sounds very complicated. A lot of the fishing stuff that I learn is they're like, this is how you should catch this fish. This is the exact location it should be. But sometimes they're not there, and sometimes they're in a different spot, and it depends on these 50 factors. So it's always changing, but generally you can catch something if you follow basic guidelines. And an example of that is the recent episode I did where I went out and caught smallmouth. I actually wrote an article about this for Texas Fish and Game, and it was how I was able to use what I knew about bass fishing at a base level to kayak out into the middle of Lake Erie and catch a smallmouth, which I'd never caught before. I've never, previous to that, had never caught a smallmouth, and it was something I'd been wanting to do. And my cat is joining me here. And I used the concepts that I read in the books about bass fishing. They usually cover a little bit about smallmouth, and I was able to take that concept and use it to put the lure where it should be to catch these fish if they're there. And so I kayaked out to an island, working off the assumption that the waves are smashing into this island continuously from all sides, and that's going to push up logs, that's going to have rocks under it that are getting worn away by that constant movement, or the sand and stuff is going to be moved away, and there's going to be exposed rocks or something down there below. Definitely got caught on a few stumps, so I'm working off the assumption that there is going to be structure off the island and that those fish are going to cling to that structure. I didn't know where the structure was. I didn't have a fish finder. I saw a few boats hovering over a few areas, so that was a clue that maybe there's probably some structure there. And then I used the information I had that I've read that said smallmouth will generally kind of eat the same lures as a largemouth bass will. So I got my kayak, I went parallel to the shore, and I just started fan casting towards the shore all the way around my boat. If I didn't get anything, I moved, 20, 30 feet in any direction, depending on which way I was going. Did the same thing, repeat, until I eventually caught a smallmouth. It took a half hour, but it was just the concept of going to an unfamiliar place, using what I'd learned to be successful. I mean, that's really all you can do unless you have a lot of great high-end technology that you can see the fish on your live scope or whatever. A lot of the time you're just hoping to identify an area where the fish will be. And I know that's a little complicated, but there's so many factors that go into fishing. But if you really, just like anything else, stick to the basic fundamentals of where a fish would be, you're going to have a higher chance of catching a fish. And I did end up catching that smallmouth. There was like a little cove inlet area. You can go back and listen to the episode if you want. There was like it was enclosed. The water was flowing in and out of it, and I cast it into the middle of that. I'm assuming in front of that it dropped off, and there was some structure under that, because that's where I caught the fish that I ended up landing. And it's just using those tips and thoughts about where fish can be. So it's a combination of doing your homework. Some of these books, if you aren't really that into it, aren't that exciting. But I get really excited about learning new information about fishing or hunting or whatever it is. A lot of dry information. And what helps me is, I just had this conversation with a buddy yesterday or the day before. I have to write it down. I have a book. I have loose leaf notebook paper, and I just take notes. The bass book I'm reading right now, I just took about 50 pages of notes in that book. I hand write it down. I don't know, it just helps me remember it better. And then you have to go out and put that into action. Those two combined are going to help you be more successful. Just reading and never going out and fishing isn't going to help you, obviously. Just going out and blind fishing will catch you fish, but it helps when you have that basic understanding, and it's a huge shortcut to learning how to catch them. I mean, I'm obviously not a professional fisherman, or haven't caught any fish probably bigger than like 3 or 4 pounds, but I put in a lot of effort into reading and studying and watching multitudes of YouTube videos about this stuff too. If you're not a big reader, that's a great resource as well. There's so many good pages out, YouTube pages out there that will really give you good information. It's hard to vet. I found a couple that I really enjoy, and that's just for you to figure out, because sometimes you don't like their personality or whatever, but that's where I've learned most of the techniques. I've learned how to use the proper crankbaits to search different depths. I've learned how to troll. I've learned how to use jigs and plastics and you name it, chatterbaits, all this stuff. And then I use what I know about bass combined with those lures and how they operate and what their function is to catch more bass. Like, for instance, last weekend, the 4th of July weekend, I was out fishing. I caught 9 bass. They weren't trophy bass or anything, but I just used that knowledge on a lake that's not great for catching bass. And it's just putting those theories or hypotheses that you read about to the test. And surprisingly, believe it or not, they work most of the time. So just a little bit about how I do stuff. Obviously, you're your own person. You can do it however you want, but that has really taken me from being frustrated out on the water every single time I went out getting skunked all the time and just being like, maybe I just suck at fishing, to within 3 years being like confident that I know I'll still be frustrated when I get on the water until I find some fish. And then putting those tools that I've gotten, fishing rods with specific sized monofilament, bait casting rods, all these different rods for different situations, the different types of baits I'm using, and then putting the knowledge that I've learned into action makes my frustration level much lower because I've done the homework on how to catch the fish. So I hope that taught you something. If you ever want any recommendations on what books I've been reading that I've found the most helpful, you can hit me up on social media. I'm not really on social media that much anymore just because I'm trying to make better quality content for you, and I'm only one person, so just something has to give. So I appreciate everybody that listens and watches this podcast, and I will be back soon with another episode. Hey, thanks for listening to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. If you're getting anything out of this, if you're learning something, if it's helped you in any way, go down in the link below and buy me a coffee. Throw me $1, throw me $2. We greatly appreciate it. Just using it to keep this ship afloat. So thank you very much.